This podcast is brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who make and drink great spirits. Join our free email newsletter for technical and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Learn more at spiritsanddistilling.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. I'm your host, Molly Troop, and my guest today is Ashley Bruns, the master blender for the Blending House. Today we're going to talk all about blending, including how Ashley utilizes both artistic process and data collection to make beautiful whiskey. Before we dive in, G&D Chillers understands that each distillery's chilling requirements are unique. On every distillery project, G&D offers the front-end design and engineering your team needs at no cost to you. Sid Delaroy from Filibuster Distillery says, "From the design and engineering to installation and startup, G&D was easy to work with. We've had great customer service since commissioning our chiller, and I'd highly recommend them for any distillery system. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com. Ashley, thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited to get to speak to you about blending.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to chat about blending and distilling and all things. All the things. It's just, I'm excited.
All the things.
All the things.
Yes.
So much fun when we get to chat.
Exactly. And I just really want to dive right in and start with how you actually got started in the spirits industry.
Yeah, so it's a roundabout way, I guess. I was working in the pharmaceutical world as a quality chemist. I did all the quality analysis on a few pharmaceutical things. And so I was headhunted from the pharmaceutical company to a distillery. They didn't really tell me where, but basically it boiled down to, booze or drugs. So I went on this adventure of a multi-part interview with, turns out to be Buffalo Trace. And I was hired on as a quality tech at Buffalo Trace. And it was there that I learned that I did not taste things the same way other people did. So it was interesting in my tasting interview. I had all these triangle tests, which I didn't know that's what they were. I'd never heard of anything like that before. And I was able to identify things that others were not able to. Just like, hey, this triangle test that has 3 glasses of vodka, one has 2 drops of gin in it. I could tell that one of them was different. At that point, I didn't know what it was. I'd actually never had gin in my life. But I was like, okay, something's wrong with this one. It's not the same. So I got the job, and it was there that I started learning blending from Drew Mavel there, the Buffalo master blender at Buffalo Trace. And I really fell in love with blending. I got to do math. I got to do science. I got to taste and create. And of course, pair that all with history. And I was like in my little nerdy dream. So I was there for a couple years, and then Four Roses stole me away, and was hired by Brent Elliott there. And when I got to Four Roses, Brent and I did all the quality from bottling line to blending to, flavor profiling and projections and profile maintenance. And I really got to hone in and specialize and truly understand whiskey and bourbon and how to look at a distillate or a maturate and say, okay, this is good, but it's not going to be good in 10 years. Like it's about to hit its peak, or, hey, this has components that could go further. So that was really where I cut my teeth. Chris Fletcher is actually the gentleman that hired me at Buffalo Trace, and he's a master distiller at Jack Daniel's now. So between Jim Rutledge, Brent Elliott, Drew Mavel, I really got to train and work with some absolute legends in the industry and really learn the core basics there. So from there, I met Monica Wolf when she came through my lab at Four Roses on a group tour from Benny's, which was actually really interesting because I didn't know what Benny's was. All I knew was it was something important and roll out the red carpet. And it was a group of female managers from Benny's that Monica was with. And of course, I didn't know Monica was Monica. And she put my name in the hat to be a craft spirits judge. And long story short, the rest is history. We started the spirits group and moved forward.
I have so many follow-up questions from this.
Yeah, I figured we should take a break.
I have a lot of information and it's wonderful, but I have a lot of questions. So working with all of these like heavy hitters in the whiskey industry, I mean, it's so much great information, so much perspective that you kind of get access to. What was your favorite part of that? And I know you don't really know anything different. That's your experience. Um, is there anything that like you think was super critical for where you are now? Like one important thing, or something that maybe like with this kind of high level stuff that now that you're kind of on your own, that you like something that surprised you with the industry that you're just like, what? This is happening?
So many things. Probably one of the biggest kind of holy cow, this is how this is done moments for me was that, you can take barrels that are from the same rickhouse, same production, and create different flavors and in project like profiles with those same barrels by using different blending techniques. But one of the most critical things I think I learned from all of these guys is one, sharing all the knowledge. Their enthusiasm to pass on their knowledge and just creativity and how they did things was amazing and very critical in my bourbon upbringing, if you will. And also just here's the basics, but then everybody had their own spin on it. Everybody took it and said, okay, here's what I know. And then you kind of do what you do. And everybody finds their own little niche. And that's how I've ended up where I am today is, I've taken little bits and pieces from what I've learned. I never worked at a big facility, but I know Nancy Fraley and she has some very interesting techniques. And I always love talking blending with her and what project she's working on or, what we can discuss or if I've got a problem. It's so fun to talk about talk with other distillers or other blenders and just get everybody's perspective because it's such a unique industry and opportunity that we've all been there, done that, or, we might look at something different. And I think a really good example of that is I just did an Amberana finish. But when that came to my table to do, I had actually never tasted Amberana, period. I had never had any expression of it. I'd never tasted it. So I did some research to see what those casks brought to the table and then applied my methods to how I wanted the end product to taste, which is blending going in and blending coming out. I evaluate every barrel and I profile and then, work those blends so that they're more willing to accept the particular flavors I hope to gain from the finish going into it. And then on the back end, doing additional blending to create a more balanced product. And I think that's why the product that I came up with from that really is standing on its own in a sea of multiple Amberana finishes. It's got a different take on it. It's a nice balance of the Amberana and the bourbon. It's like an oatmeal raisin cookie in a glass.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's like you've got this really nice Kentucky standard go-to Kentucky bourbon with like the bold vanilla and caramels. You're sipping on your nice bourbon and you're eating this fresh oatmeal raisin cookie is kind of how the end product comes together. And I love that it stands on its own in that way. And I contributed that to the fact that I'd never had an Amberana finish. And it was my own take on how I would approach it without that outside influence.
Well, and I love what you said too about, everyone has their own different take and applying this to Amberana like that. It's a great way to get different products. Have you ever, and I mean, there's room for so many different techniques out there. Have you ever seen a technique out there in your career where you're like, ooh, that's actually not the way to go about it? Or have you found that there's a lot of acceptance, a lot of a lot of diversity in the techniques that you can use.
I think so. I think there is a lot. And this is kind of what also fueled mine and Monica's drive to create the spirits group in consulting. You know, when people would buy barrels from her or her dad, she's like they would just dump them and put them in a bottle. And it's because you don't know what you don't know. And there's so much opportunity to take those barrels and really create something special. No matter what barrels you get, you can really work with different techniques and things, but there's also not a lot of education or knowledge out in the world on how to do that. And I was so blessed with the opportunity to learn a lot of those skills, early on and grow from that. But it's not something anyone or everyone has the opportunity to do. And that's, when I'm doing blending classes, be it at Liquor Barn or Benny's or Total Wine or wherever I happen to be doing a blending class, I like to educate and share my knowledge. One of the classes that I teach, I have, we will go through, depending on the time allotment, 3 to 4 samples. We'll go through, evaluate them, and discuss them. And in the end, I'll reveal that they're the same 10 barrels, exact same 10 barrels, distilled on the same day, at the same time, with the same type of still, all the things. I just use different techniques in how I put them together. Each barrel's the same volume used from that barrel. And it blows people's minds because it could be 3 or 4 different products. They're like, none of these taste the same. And I was like, it's because of how they're put together. It's just like if you're baking a cake. If you don't put the ingredients together just right, that cake may not rise up and be nice and fluffy. It might be hard as a rock, even though you use the same ingredients. And so it's always something I enjoy doing, is getting to share that knowledge with people. And so I see a lot of people just dump barrels together and put it in a bottle and say, here you go. I'm like, well, you only dumped 5 barrels, but if you had removed one of those that maybe had some different compounds in there, just doesn't play well with others, that blend could have been a little bit better. So as a consultant, that's one of the things I try to teach and share and pass along to any of my clients as well.
Okay, so I have what may be the most difficult question I'm going to ask today.
Okay.
And that is something that you might not have an answer for, and that's okay. Of all these heavy hitters that you worked with, do you have a favorite?
Ooh. Like a favorite person to work with, or?
Yeah, favorite person.
Oh.
We'll go with favorite person.
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I could, because I would jump at the opportunity to do a project with any of them. I've been very fortunate that I'm still in touch with Jim Rutledge. He actually came out to the blending house not too long ago and got to hang out and see it. And yeah, I was like, it was a fun, full circle moment. Yeah, I don't think I could nail down a favorite person or even experience for that matter. There were so many good things and so many opportunities that I was very blessed with from, being put in, relative closeness with these individuals. It's just because you get to work with someone doesn't always mean they're going to be willing to take you under their wing and start teaching you things. They've got to have that teacher heart, and I was very fortunate that everyone I worked with did.
That's amazing. Okay, we've touched upon it a little bit, but where you are now is the blending house. You and Monica started that, and you are in charge of liquid development and production. Let's talk a little bit more about what that means and what your normal day-to-day looks like.
Utter chaos right now is kind of my day-to-day. So the blending house is a blending and bottling facility as well as storage. We have, at the end of the year, we will have completed 7 rickhouses, 20,000 barrel rickhouses. And so we have got those will hopefully be filled. We, of course, have our products there. And our facility, like I said, is blending and bottling. So that is not to say we have icks, but those little frustrating aspects of bottling at contract bottling and processing and I was having to go on site, I felt like, or be very diligent and overly like communicative, like, I need you to do this, this, and this, and it needs to be done in this way, and we need to make sure this rests for 12 hours. So I felt like being able to have our own facility allows us to ensure my blending instructions are being followed specifically, to my designations, and also just have that extra control where these are our brands. We do, there's a little bit of a mentality around, especially with contract. I think if you're running, the filler, the labeler, there's a little more pride into that product when it's yours versus, well, we're just running whatever, try to get as many bottles through as we can. And so I think this was kind of on our radar from the very beginning when Monica and I started talking, like, all right, she's a big planner and, 5-year goal, 10-year goal. Having our own facility was more like a 10-year goal that kind of came to fruition. I guess this all started about 3 years in. So we are wrapping up construction on the blending bottling facility, and our line is in. And so my day-to-day right now is really making sure we get the right people hired, getting everybody trained, getting our, documentation for the lines together so that once we're able to get the line up and running, we've got that ready to go. Training on the line and how to run the line with everybody, getting our processes written out, SOPs, and if we're going to be compliant, like ISO compliant and all that fun stuff. We still have the rickhouses, so if we need samples pulled, I'm still doing all of my brands. So making sure that we have product out there. If I need to do any blends, get those done. Need to pick any single barrels, get those picked. Just this morning, I was coordinating with, we need to bottle some single barrels of a product and getting that coordinated in line time because, the blending house isn't ready to bottle yet. So I'm still working with several other facilities. Do we have labels? Do we have bottles? Can we run? How long does it take to get those things? Just earlier this week, I was in Nashville meeting with distributors, doing a DSM, talking to the sales reps. Last week, I was in Chicago with an amazingly beautiful dinner that we did with a French restaurant called Mon Ami Gabi. And they did a pairing with multiple products of mine for a multi-course dinner, and it was amazing. So my day-to-day changes, but utter chaos, I think, is the best descriptor for it.
Yeah, I it's kind of, quality all around in every interaction. And, the sales component is also like very important part of, a master blender role. I know that you just mentioned that you're installing these really cool barrel houses.
Yes.
And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about how you are using these barrel houses or rick houses to help with data collection.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. So these are the K-Rax barrel house rick houses, and their Cutter Construction has created the K-Rax system, and they do a lot of the fixes and updating of existing rick houses for safety. So they've taken all the things they've learned from that, and they've put it into this system of a rick house design. So I can actually go into my rick houses and touch any barrel without having to climb around like a monkey. So it's very easy to get to the barrels. It's very easy to pull samples. Fall hazards it's not eliminated. It's still a rick house, but significantly reduced. And we've also got a unique kind of ventilation system. We're working with the University of Kentucky, and we've done some airflow testing already, which we'll continue to do, spring versus summer versus winter. Obviously, temperature definitely affects that. We're also working with a group using sensors throughout the rick house to monitor temperature changes, evaporation, like ethanol vapors, moisture, among other things, and tracking that. So we will then be able to use all this data we're collecting and compare it to the maturation and tasting notes of the bourbon and whiskey that we are aging. So as we're putting new fills in, then we immediately start collecting all this data. So then we're going to be able to marry those two things, which really hasn't been done yet. Not on this scale, anyways. So it's going to be amazing. And we're looking at every opportunity to start collecting data, doing some research, partnerships to do that. And they're great. It's really interesting. They can have 6 guys set the dunnage for these rickhouses in like 6 days, which is the main frame. It's all put together at Cutter Woodworking. Everything's CNC cut, so it goes together like Lincoln logs, basically. They come in and they set each section, and then it's even seismic rated. So if there's a tornado at the blending house, I'm going to a rickhouse.
Which is not a normal statement.
It is not a normal statement, but I absolutely will be there.
With all this data that you're collecting, do you have any plans to write a white paper?
Hopefully, when the time is right and we have the data and mature it and profiling notes, I will be able to write a couple papers with that. Or some of my team. I've got some brilliant individuals on our team that are just sharp as a tack, and I look forward for them to have the opportunity to put their spin on things and try things. And some of them may want to write some white papers. I also hope to do some studies with some yeast. We've got a couple working theories that we're excited about and want to do some testing in that sense as well. We do have a 100-gallon pot still, so we'll be doing some R&D on that. There's lots of opportunity, and we are designed and created so that if we want to do research, we can do as much or as little over time. And obviously, I don't have any nice GC mass specs or anything currently, but one day I might be able to afford it.
For every quality person's dream piece of equipment.
Right. Like, we are getting what we need to be up and running, bare basics right now. But I have a working blending lab, and then separate from that, I have a bottling quality lab that is designed large enough that we have the space to do lots of things. So it might look a little sparse at the beginning, but hopefully that'll get filled up quickly.
Yeah, it's all about, growth. And it sounds like you're very excited to do some research. You're excited to, to distill and test out some theories of this whole build out and the opportunity and growth that it's bringing you guys. What is the thing that gets you most excited for the future?
Honestly, I hope that eventually everything's up and going and I can get back to doing a little more consulting.
Ah.
Monica and I always joked that, we'd like to keep all the puppies in the pound, so to speak, but, we needed to pay the bills. And so if one day I am in a position where I can do a few more consulting things on the side, that could help some people who maybe get off the ground, or just offer and share my knowledge, I would love to get back to doing that a little bit. Yeah, it's like kid at Christmas when it comes to the research too. So
yes, and those kind of go hand in hand in a large way. What is so exciting about consulting? Why do you love it?
I just enjoy it. The passion and creativity of the craft industry is just incomparable. I don't know that I could ever put any comparison to anything in it. And I love it. I love going to different areas of the states, of the world, and getting to talk to people and just experience their passion, be it distilling rum or brandy or or whiskey. Obviously, most of the people I work with are doing whiskey, but the gin distillers out there, there's so much going on, and you can always learn from everybody. Even, I'm going to learn anytime I talk to another distiller, as you know, anytime we're chatting, I feel like I learned something. It's the world is open to so much, and I'll never stop learning. You can always learn more. You're never done learning. And so that's probably I get to help people and I get to learn, and that just makes me so happy.
I can totally relate to that. Definitely, when you're on the road, so to speak, you just get the opportunity to gather other insights that you don't have the opportunities to see yourself, right? There's so many different ways to
Right.
do things, and it can be fascinating. Is there a particular thing you learned while consulting that just resonates with you to today?
I don't know that there's really just one thing that really stuck with me. I've just learned so much. When I first started consulting with Monica, I the business side of things, the business plans, the financials, all of the stuff that she does, it was foreign to me. And I feel like at this point in stage in our lives, I have such a better understanding of it and how I can use that knowledge to better prepare someone, a craft distiller or just an NDP even, help work those numbers and I'm not going to say restrictions, but those kind of guidelines so that the product can be created to complement it rather than, the product and the business competing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think when you're first getting started, there's so many ways you can go wrong, and there's a lot of ways you can go right as well. Um, but it's amazing to kind of like have that viewpoint going into someone's business and being able to tell them, maybe that's not the way you should go.
hmm Like, hey, I know you really want to do a super limited release with only, maybe 300 bottles, but if we make a product that gets within a lower price point that we could sell a lot more of, it could really support it and provide a foundation for the entire, you know, company to be able to do that. Or just those little subtle things that really help bring it together.
Absolutely. Not even to mention like distribution.
Yes, and sales and being out in the markets and working the markets and helping. It's great to be with a distributor, but you really need a team to go out and do that as well. And God love anyone who loves to do that. Monica and I didn't really do that aspect until we started doing our own stuff. And that's been a learning curve too. We always kind of joke that marketing and sales was something we didn't offer in our consultancy. So any of our clients, they did their own, and now we're like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot, but it's also very necessary, and it's a great thing to learn and know and understand, and how they all need to come together to be successful.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, especially like having a science background, and I remember like graduating, doing my capstone project my senior year of college, and you had to do a public speech. And after I did that, thought to myself, I'll never have to publicly speak again. I've had to publicly speak many times since, including right now.
hmm
But I think like it's not what I expected. And like my personality back then maybe would have made me think or someone else think that I wouldn't be capable of it either. And I wonder too, as someone with like more of the science background, maybe gravitates more towards those things in life. Was that a bit of a struggle to kind of learn how to do the marketing and sales part? Or did it struggle and you kind of have blossomed in it?
So I give my mother the credit for this. As a science person, a lot of us are very much introverted, and I like to think I am very introverted. However, I can do the public speaking. I can obviously do the things, but I do that because growing up, my mom really pushed me to do speech competitions. I did demonstrate like 4-H demonstration competitions. I was like a regional president for the teen club, so I had to MC events. no matter how uncomfortable it made me, she really pushed me to do those things. And that has helped me so much in my life, especially now. It doesn't bother me to get up in front of 300 people and talk, or 5 people in a room, to present or pitch an idea or discuss what a blend is and why I did it that way, or teach a class. Those foundations that were laid early on through 4-H and FFA for me just really slingshotted me when the opportunities came in my professional life.
That's great. I don't think I took speech. I did take one public speaking class in college, and that did actually help quite a bit. But kind of, I imagine too, like, do you find that you have some kind of preparation standard that you like for yourself, like especially when doing something more technical, like classes or anything? Do you have like that you have to review a certain amount of stuff before you go and teach it? Do you like make a new script every time you do something? Are you confident with just having the script that you have in your head and then going into a room of 300 people and I hate to say winging it, but be a little less scripted?
So, yeah, I mean, depending on the situation, if I have the opportunity and the ability to, I like to prepare, do my research. If I'm speaking, like if I'm talking about blending and blending techniques, I'll have an outline or a PowerPoint with a couple slides that have maybe a picture and a couple words on it that would trigger me to talk about something. That's really it. I mean, I've definitely walked into hey, you're doing a staff training this afternoon. Okay, what am I talking about? Cool. Let's fly by the seat of our pants. And so I can do those, but especially if I'm doing a training or a teaching thing, I like to be a little more prepared. And if I can provide something for someone to take home with them so that when they're away from the classroom setting where I'm trying to cover all this information, they can go back and revisit it and maybe reflect on their notes. In preparation, I really like to have those types of things. Even if it's just a flight, like when we're designing a flight for a tasting, I'll put little notes on it or spaces that hopefully will trigger them, and they can use that once they leave the class.
I love a little note myself, and I can't imagine doing it in a different way. I have some producers who like are just a no note person, and they don't even use notes as they're talking. It's crazy. I don't comprehend these.
No, I've recently discovered the Rocket books, and it's amazing because I can scan it in, and then my notes are digitally saved into whatever folder I want in OneNote or Dropbox or whatever, or emailed to myself, depending on the icon I click or I mark. But it's also just you wipe it and it's free, or it's like clear and clean, and you have a brand new notebook. So I'm constantly writing things down and taking notes or questions, or hey, you need to remember to go cancel that appointment, or make sure you order plates for the birthday party. Just little being able to write and take notes and have that to reflect on. I mean, especially as a busy mom and business owner, I feel like I'm kind of scatterbrained a lot.
I can relate. It's
Exactly.
something that, especially in my own career, I have an 8-month-old baby. I have a toddler as well, and have gone through like being blending distiller while also like being pregnant, and kind of gone through a little bit of the challenges, especially on the sensory side. Uh, ha- have you ever? I mean, I know you have to a degree. Um, did you experience any change in your palate while working and being pregnant?
I was even more sensitive, which made it very challenging, because I had to kind of step back and go, okay, this seems overwhelming to me, but realistically, is it overwhelming, or am I just being too sensitive because of all my hormones and all the things fueling um, my body at the moment while I'm pregnant? Because I did everything by nose while I was pregnant. Especially my first son, I was at Four Roses when I was pregnant. So those were things that's very consistent. All the barrels are very similar. You don't have as large of a, delta between barrels as you do in the craft world. So, everything's just on a larger scale there. So I did a lot by nose. And even this with my second one that's getting ready to turn 1. Yes, I'm already sensitive and pick things up others don't, but it became difficult because it was so much. Sometimes you got to back that microscope up to truly see a clear picture. And that was the challenge for me. I felt like with both pregnancies.
How did you find out like a workaround or an aid that helped get through that?
So I would reference samples that I used for sensory training, things that I knew, okay, this is what this is, this is what this is, and this is an acceptable expression of it. I would also use like other products that I knew were done and good and, from the shelf. Like, products, especially if I was blending one of mine, I'm like, okay, this isn't a batch that I can use as a control. But going through and smelling a cinnamon stick versus ground cinnamon and orange peel versus, splitting open a wedge of an orange. Little things like that just to kind of remind me what the appropriate level was. Even though it seemed really, really strong to me, that was actually a normal level to other people, and just doing a little bit of a reset on what was acceptable and what wasn't on the intensities was what I found the most helpful.
There's someone I met a while ago who, when pregnant, they already kind of had and I think this is quite kind of the wrong term, but a photographic memory when it comes to smells.
Mhm.
And they got pregnant and they were super sensitive to new things, especially faults. And
Mhm.
they could take that information that they were able to pick up while pregnant, and then they continued with that beyond pregnancy. And imagine maybe not quite the same, since your sensitives hopefully went away and they weren't necessarily helpful either. But is there anything that like kind of kept with you in that experience?
I can't say that there was anything significantly different other than the intensities, because I'm very, very sensitive just in general to faults, to flavors, to just all the things. Um, but just that, it's good to have that reset or a reminder about intensities and the differences in, vanilla bean versus vanilla flavoring versus artificial vanilla versus real vanilla. The reminder, and just, having that control item to make sure, because I don't know what the word for it is, but I completely understand when I smell something, I have like a memory that flashes. That's you you get a particular smell and it makes you think of grandma or grandpa or mom or dad or something. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
Oh man, I so many questions from that. I had this really fun experience recently where, and I think this is most people's hardest part with sensory is words, the words to describe what you're smelling.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
was having this conversation with someone who was like, "This smells like mothballs," and I was like, "Hmm, that's interesting." Like, to me, that's a negative thing, and that's not necessarily what I'm smelling. And I had a follow up question. I'm like, "Do you think this to you like is associated with cedar? Like, do you associate mothballs with cedar?" And they had a moment. They actually went home, found a cedar chest with mothballs, smelled it. We're like, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. That's the smell I'm getting. And it was really just an interesting moment of like language barriers with sensory that, sometimes you just really have to dive into um, the different words that we have and think if there's any commonalities.
Exactly. I love that. And that's when I'm talking to people and I'm like, just because you smell mothballs, I might smell you're like, you're smelling mothballs, I'm smelling cedar. after a little bit of communication, you were like, oh yeah, there we go. And it's interesting. And I love that. Like, and I tell people, just because you don't use the same words as me doesn't mean we're not smelling and tasting the same things. And I think it's really important for
Oh
people
yeah.
to realize too.
Kind of, do you, when you're kind of, working to train a team and get you guys on the same kind of language, do you use a flavor wheel to help with that? Do you have your own in-house version?
I do not have I don't really use the flavor wheel. I might eventually use it more, but I haven't worked with it enough and it was never used in anything that was taught to me. So I use the let's smell and taste things and talk about them. And I will usually have people write their own notes. And then when we discuss, I ask them to relay it. I'm not going to give you notes. I want you to describe this. So even if I've got like a cinnamon stick in a jar that's, they can't see what it is, but they can smell it, take the lid off and smell it, then how did they describe that blindly? And, do the comparison that way. That way we're getting that truly unbiased verbalization of the smell.
Totally. And as someone who also really doesn't use a flavor wheel, besides for maybe for marketing purposes to like help with the crowd, but like for training staff, I don't usually use one. I find it like it's kind of similar, but not the same, like grouping. Sometimes when you're tasting something, it really kind of like comes off as grain, right? And you're, again, like I your staff is kind of always kind of pointed at you to like be the one leading it. It's really important, as you said, to let them come up with the language, and then you guys can kind of go back and forth and parlay and figure out, where you're similar, where you're different, and if you're really just different in the words you're choosing, or if you're actually sensing other things. It's really fascinating to have that experience with people. I feel like I lost my train of thought a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think there are different tools that we could use, and I think the flavor wheel is a great tool. And some people might find it easier to follow that than others. So I think it's a great something to have, especially with marketing. There's been so much use of it in marketing that the general consumer is probably more familiar with it than how you or I might approach it.
Absolutely. Kind of want to dive back a little bit to the beginning of your journey, and talk about, we both started our careers in quality labs, and I feel like that's such an interesting place to start because you get really like kind of the back end, the last little piece of production, and you focus there. What kind of perspective do you think this granted you starting in a quality lab as a newbie?
I think it's a great place to start because it forces you to look at those subtle details, be it the placement of a label or the flavors of that, the processing batch that you're getting ready to approve to go on a line. You really have to look at those finer details in the quality lab. So as you evolve as a blender, as a distiller, you know, in this industry in general, your base where you've cut your teeth is to look at the finer details and not miss details. So I think it really gives you a leg up in the whole grand scheme of things to have that kind of in your back pocket and a foundation.
Yeah, I think it also gives you this kind of ability to deal with, like you mentioned, minutia. Like I distinctly have this memory, I don't think I'll ever shake it, of measuring corks and doing like I think 1,000 corks to measure to see if they were consistent. And like someone has to do that work. It's important. It was
Yes.
an important project. And you're like, this is it. This is like some of the random weird stuff that you're always gonna have to deal with.
Yes, 100%. And it's time consuming. One of the things I've noticed, I didn't really notice, but it's a good bad thing, I guess, in the lab. I will spend a lot of time up front prepping my samples. If I'll have a box of samples that were sent to me. And it's not just unpacking them and setting them on the counter and look at them. I'm going to make sure the information I need is on the label. I like to label the top of the cork so that when I sit it down in my cabinets to have like pull out drawers, I can easily look down and grab what I need as I'm blending. Because once I have my notes, then I know, okay, I'm going to pull these barrels. And it's easier to look down and grab the top without having to pick every one of them up and look at the face label. But that takes time. And so I might spend as much time prepping and going through and setting everything up as I do evaluating. It's like, you got to climb up that hill before you can do the things, but then it's all downhill from there.
And I have to think that might also be, starting quality, that is emphasized there, but even back to getting a degree in chemistry and having good lab practices. Like there's so many times when you're in a lab and you kind of just want to, get through it. But if you start yourself off with all these little details, you'll find that like you're not rushed in a certain element, that you have everything kind of unlocked, and that you're like prepped for paying attention to actually watching the lab take place.
Yeah, I mean, it's preparing for success. So I used to get so frustrated. All my chemistry and biology professors, I would get, if you didn't put your units, even though you weren't converting anything, but if you didn't put your units, you'd get points knocked off. And I used to get so frustrated. Well, now I feel like I'm the person who's like the unit police. Because like, you didn't write that down. So how do I know if we're talking about grams or ounces or bottles or cases or liters or gallons or wine gallons or proof gallons? Like, and I mean, I've seen those mistakes happen where someone thought it was in gallons, but it was in liters. And then it made it to the point of, well, people want to know why your projection said that we would have this many cases, but you've only got this many cases, and you're like much shorter.
Right.
I'm like,
my units were off.
Yeah, I'm like, and you want to know why I'm so anal about units? This is why.
Yeah, I've had that same experience as well. Like I feel like I'm the unit police, and it's still like one of my least favorite classes when it came to chemistry was analytical, but yet the mantra of precise and accurate goes through my head frequently. And
yes,
right? Like that's an important saying when it comes to analytical.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking the time, taking the notes, preparing your workspace and your samples, and you're setting yourself up for success, because then you can watch that reaction. You can ensure that everything is done a certain way, and then it's you can repeat it. You can scale it because you've been precise in that, and the units are right and the calculations are right, and now we can grow it and scale it and do so much more because you spent 5 more minutes up front preparing.
Right. And now you also have time to write better notes because you're not just freaking out because you weren't prepared.
Yeah. So many things I wish I had really learned and grasped onto while I was in college. Like, I feel like, wow, I would have done it. It would have been so much easier. Like, that's why they had me do that. So then I try to teach, when I'm working with new employees, or, we've got a couple guys that are younger, college age or straight out of college. So as I'm working with them and teaching them things, I'm like, so trust me on this. Learn from your mistakes if you must. I've made them. This will make your life easier.
Right. And you just pull listen.
Yeah. And like, not to be the old guy or the old girl, like saying, well, back in my day, but I promise you, you will appreciate this. And then 99.9% of the time, it's okay, that made so much more sense. Because I've also learned, especially working with Monica and Richard, when he was with us, we would joke and triangulate calculations on certain things, because they would definitely do things, I would say smarter, like shorter, was just triangulate it differently. But then my brain would always be the longest, hardest way to get to the exact same answer. And I always thought it was funny. And I think it was really good to have getting to the same, if we all got the same answer, we knew that we were golden. But it was great to see there's more than one way to do things too. Just because that's how you do it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. And it's just the end all be all, there's no other way. And I think it's important as a business owner, as a manager, as anyone who is potentially leading or teaching anything, to keep that in mind. Because we can all grow and learn no matter what age we are or where we're at in our careers.
I love that. And that is a great place to end. For more than 30 years, G&D Chillers has had the proven solution for distilleries. Visit them today at gdchillers.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, go to spiritsanddistilling.com and sign up for our free newsletter featuring news stories every week from some of the best writers and distillers in the distilling world. Actually, if people want to learn more or taste for themselves some of the results of the projects that you've been hard working on, how can they follow your journey?
You can follow me on Instagram at Ashley Barnes MB. I am on Facebook as just Ashley Barnes. And of course, you can always follow and definitely check out The Blending House on all the platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and we have our website up and going as well.
We'll be back in 2 weeks with another in-depth distilling conversation for you. Thanks for joining us. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Spirits and Distilling for those who love to make and drink great spirits. Join our free newsletter today at spiritsanddistilling.com for pragmatic, technical, and creative distilling stories in your inbox every week. Sign up now at spiritsanddistilling.com or click on the link in the show notes.